سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد صلوات. I began with ayat number 31 of Surah Araf, Surah number 7. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that whenever you go to a masjid, go with your own zinat, be in your best form. I would like to seek the blessings of these words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to talk about the importance of masjid in Islam, keeping in mind that we heard about this very controversial judgment passed in India about Babri Masjid. I'm not going to talk about the Babri Masjid case itself, but just, to talk about the importance of masjid in Islam. We know that from the Islamic perspective, when we look at this space in this world, not every place has same value in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we look at the Muslim societies, in every city, wherever there is a masjid, the masjid has the most important value in the eyes of our faith. The word masjid itself is of course, an Arabic term, and the word masjid comes from sajada, which means to do sajda. Sajada is the verb, masjid is a noun referring to the place where the sajda is done. So masjid basically means a place where you do sajda to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very similar to the word, for example, majlis. Masjid rhymes with the word majlis. Majlis comes from jalasa, to sit. And so majlis means a place where people sit down or gather. And so it's a place of gathering. And when you look at the English term mosque, this is the English equivalent of the word masjid. These days internet has become, free for everyone. People just, forward things. And you must have got this email saying, oh, don't use the word mosque for masjid, because mosque means mosquito. It's nothing to do with mosquito. I looked at the root of that as far as the English language is concerned. The word mosque in English comes from the French version of it, with the double E at the end. And in French language, the word mosque has come from old Italian language. In Italian language, it has come from the old Spanish language. And this word in Spanish language comes from Arabic, probably the time when Muslims ruled the area of Spain. And so you will see there are many, many words which originate from one language, ended up in a different form in another language. And so mosque is masjid. That is the English way of saying it. It's nothing to do with mosquito. Just because it sounds like mosque and mosquito, it doesn't mean they are the same thing. It's just like there are many, many words like this which have gone from Arabic to Spanish to Italian to English. The word admiral, one of the highest position in Navy, in the Western naval forces. Admiral. Where does this come from? This comes from Arabic, Amirul Bahr. Amirul Bahr means the chief of the seas, who is the chief of the naval forces. So Amirul Bahr from Arabic went to Spanish, from Latin, and then by the time it reached to English language, it became admiral. The word magazine. Do you know this word magazine, so common in English, is from Arabic? What does it mean? What is the difference between a book and a magazine? A book basically is a text which deals with one subject. Magazine is actually a compilation of variety of things in one, under same cover. It's just like this storeroom. Storeroom has everything in it. If you look at the Arabic term, makhzan. Makhzan means the storeroom. The plural of makhzan is a makhazin. And from makhazin, it went to Spanish, Latin, ended up in English as a magazine. This is how even when you use the machine guns, you have this magazine there. It is a storage of the bullets in there. And so there are many words in English language which originated from Arabic, but by the time it reached to English form, the pronunciation changed. And so there's no problem in using the word mosque for masjid when you are talking in English, especially to non-Muslim people. Salawat. Anyway, let's get back to masjid. Not all masajid are of the same value in Islam. There is a hierarchy. There are 4 masajid which are at the top. Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, Masjid al-Nabi in Medina, Masjid al-Kufa in Kufa, and Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. We are told by the hadith that we have from the Masumeen, you do 1 namaz in Masjid al-Haram, it is equal to 100,000 namaz. The sawab of it. 1 namaz in Masjid al-Nabi in Medina is equal to 10,000 namaz. And therefore, those who go to Mecca and Medina and still do their namaz in a hotel, they don't know what they are losing. You go all the way from Toronto to Mecca, and still you do your namaz in the hotel? Go there. For 1 namaz, you get the sawab of 100,000 namaz. If you are in Medina, 1 namaz in Masjid al-Nabi, the sawab is equal to 10,000 namaz. Masjid al-Kufa and Masjid al-Aqsa, as far as sawab is concerned, are on the same level. 1 namaz in these 2 masajid is equal to 1,000 namaz. Salawat. Now, besides these 4 specific masajid, in every city, especially when you look at the Muslim cities around the world, you will see they will have many, many masajid. And there also there is a hierarchy. A masjid which is known as Al-Jami', where Jummah prayers is held, has more value than the other neighborhood masajid. So the Jami' Masjid, for example, 1 namaz there would be equal to 100 namaz. But if you look at a masjid which is in your neighborhood, for example, still there is a sawab. Compared to reciting at home, coming to your neighborhood masjid, 1 namaz, the sawab is equal to 25 namaz. And if you do that in the Jamaat form, then just think about the number of sawab you get for each rakat. It's something you cannot even think and come to that number. Salawat. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, given different value to different, places in the world when it comes to the masajid. There is a recommendation in our Sharia that even inside your own home, you don't need to have a mihrab and a masjid, no. But it's recommended to have a designated place for prayers. Not necessarily a designated room. Of course, if you have a space, why not? But a place where you say, this is the place where I would normally do the namaz. It doesn't have the hukum of masjid. It is not like masjid. But in your home, that area will be considered to be more sacred than other parts of your own home. Salawat. The emphasis that we have on coming to the masjid, just 2 or 3 ahadith from the Masumeen. The Prophet himself says, Man masha ila masjidillah falahu bikulli khutwatin khata'ha حتى يرجع إلى منزله. A person who goes to the mosque, for every step that he or she takes to go to the masjid and to come back to the home, for every step, the Prophet says, he will have 10 hasanat. 10 good deeds will be counted there, free, without doing it. وَمَحَى عَنْهُ 10 سَيِّئَاتٍ. 10 sins will be forgiven. وَرَفَعَ لَهُ 10 darajat. And whatever status that he has, it will be elevated and increased to 10 more levels. As opposed to this, to abandon a masjid, not to go and do the namaz, to the extent that nobody goes to that masjid anymore. Viran padiye. Nobody goes to the masjid. This is considered to be makruh. According to the hadith that we have from our sixth Imam, he says, ثَلَاثَ يَشْكُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. In the hereafter, 3 things will complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 1, مَسْجِدٌ خَرَابٌ لَا يُصَلَّ فِيهِ أَهْلُهُ. A masjid which is in ruins because the people of that area do not go to do the namaz there. So the masjid will complain. وَعَالِمٌ بَيْنَ جُهَالٍ. And an alim who is there in a community of ignorance who don't want to use him. No comment on this. وَمُصْحَفٌ مُغْلَقٌ قَدْ وَقَعَ عَلَيْهِ الْغُبَارِ لَا يُقْرَأْ فِيهِ. And the Quran, which is sitting there in the home, somewhere on the shelf, gathering ghubar, dust on it, and it's not being recited. That Quran is going to also complain on the day of Qiyamah. For those who have bought their houses near the center, especially for them, it is makruh for a neighbor of the masjid to do his namaz at home without an excuse. If it's raining, it's snowing, he's not feeling well, okay. But if there is no excuse, and still this neighbor of masjid does the namaz in his home, this is makruh. Because one of the hadiths from the Prophet we have is, he says, لا صلاة لجار المسجد إلا في مسجده. The neighbor of the masjid has no namaz except inside in the masjid of his own neighborhood. Salawat padhne ek baar. It doesn't mean you get scared from buying houses around here. There's just one more incentive to make sure, our masajid are, attended. Salawat padhne ek baar. Couple of important rules and regulations about how to, maintain the masjid and to understand the rulings governing a masjid. One of the most important thing, and because we have, the opportunity never comes to discuss these issues, and therefore I thought it's important to talk about it for the benefit of the community in general. When does a place or a building become masjid from the Shari'i technical point of view? There is a concept in Sharia where we are told that the sigha has to be recited. Sigha means the wordings. The wordings dedicating the place as a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can have places where people do namaz. Normally we call it musalla. But there is a difference between musalla and a masjid. You will see there are so many Islamic centers around in North America. Many Imam Bargahs where they have namaz regularly. They might call it masjid, but technically it's not a masjid. It is a musalla, a place where they are doing the namaz in Jamaat form regularly. A place becomes masjid when the sigha is recited. When the wordings are recited to dedicate the place as a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As soon as this dedication is done, what happens? Two important rules come in. Number one, that place becomes the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A masjid doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes out from the ownership of the donors or the founders who built it, and comes into the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when that happens, of course those who built it, worked for it, donated for it, they can be, according to the waqf or the deed agreement, they can become the custodians to manage that place. But from the Sharia point of view, nobody is the owner of a masjid but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes out of the ownership of the donor. And therefore, you will see the masala very clear in this issue that a masjid can then never be inherited. A mu'min, builds a place, dedicates that as a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After 100 years, his children come and say, oh, my dad built this. We are the owner. You are not children of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the owner now. And Allah doesn't die. You cannot inherit that anymore. It cannot be inherited. It cannot be leased. The masjid. Not the center ki baat nahi ho rahi hai, masjid ki baat ho rahi hai. It cannot be sold. It cannot be mortgaged. Because it is not our property. It is the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think it is important for us to realize this point. It's a very fine fiqhi point, and this should actually put more pressure on the community to make sure that our property here is out of debt and out of mortgage. The sooner the better, only then this Musalla of Ghadir will become truly Masjid al-Ghadir, inshallah. Salawat pradhne ek baar. The reason why the Shias have been reluctant to build masajid immediately when they go to new places, because once you build a place as a masjid, not as a mambara, not an Islamic center, those rules are very different. When you dedicate a place as a masjid is a masjid forever. The usage of that masjid can never be changed. Even if the whole community leaves that neighborhood, even if the entire Muslim community abandons that city, nobody lives there anymore. That building becomes ruins. Still, that will be considered as a masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so a masjid is a masjid forever. That is the basic ruling that we have to keep in mind. Not only that, even when it comes to the fixtures and the items of the masjid, it has to be used for a masjid, or even if it's no more useful for that masjid, it should be given to another masjid. Or if that is not possible, then you basically dispose it, sell it, and use that money again for the masjid itself. Because remember, the underlying philosophy is that masjid is the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat pradhne ek baar. So the first important ruling about masjid is once the masjid is dedicated, the place is dedicated as a masjid, it becomes the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing is that once it becomes the masjid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it becomes sacred. And it acquires this sacredness and holiness of itself. And then the ruling comes in. It is haram to make a masjid najis. To the extent that if you come inside a masjid and you see that there is a najasat there, or an area of the masjid has become najis, it is wajib on you first to purify that area before you do your namaz. The only situation where you will do the namaz first is if you are running out of time and your namaz will become qaza. But if there is enough time to do the taharat of that place and then do namaz, it is wajib first to purify that area of the masjid. And it's not only the issue of the custodian of the masjid or those who are managing the masjid, it is the duty an individual who comes in there and he finds that this area is najis, they have to purify it before they do their namaz. Salawat. And therefore it is haram, for example, to allow a non-Muslim to come inside the mosque. And when we are talking about it, it's not only the issue of a non-Muslim. Even a Muslim who is in the state of janabat or haze, he or she is not allowed to come and stay inside the masjid. They are allowed to enter from one gate and exit from another, but only pass by through. But they are not allowed to sit there in the masjid. This is the hurmat of the masjid. And this is something we have to keep in mind. Of course, this is for all the masajid, except Masjidul Haram and Masjidul Nabi. There, even going from one gate and exiting from another is not permissible for a person who is in the state of janabat or haze, because of the importance given to Masjidul Nabi and Masjidul Haram. Salawat. This actually brings me to the issue of Imambara. Why the Shias everywhere you go, whether it's Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, or wherever they have migrated in other places of the world, why do the Shias have masjid and Imambara? It actually goes back to this issue of the space known as masjid, which is sacred, and it has certain restrictions. Non-Muslims cannot come in. Even a Shia and a Muslim in the state of najasat cannot come in. So how do we call people to convey our message? That is where you will see that the masajid are normally built smaller and the Imambara attached to it is wider or bigger. Because when it comes to the Imambara, Husainiya, Imam Bargah, there are no restrictions. You can call anyone. Muslim, non-Muslim, Pak, Najis, doesn't matter. The whole purpose of building the Imambara was to facilitate coming of all kinds of people there so that they can get the message of Imam Hussein bin Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Sometimes our people, even put restrictions in the Imambara, make it like masjid. They have to think about it. Why do we have masjid besides, Imambara besides masjid? The whole purpose was that you can use that facility without worrying about the restrictions which are there, which are attached with the masjid. And that is the reason why we have Imam Bargahs. We can do so many things. And so keep that difference historically between the masjid and Imam Bargah. All the rules that I talk about masjid were for masjid only. When it comes to Imam Bargah, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want. Of course, it should be within the bounds of the Sharia. But there are no restrictions that we see which are there as far as masjid is concerned. Salawat. Masjid al-Nabi और Masjid al-Haram की हैसियत कुछ और है मसाजिद में. ये इतनी मुक़द्दस मकामात हैं کہ جہاں دوسرے مساجد میں انسان جنابت اور حیض کی حالت میں مسلمان ایک گیٹ سے انٹر ہو سکتا ہے، دوسرے سے باہر نکل سکتا ہے، ہی کین گو تھرو، لیکن وہ رک نہیں سکتا ہے۔ قرآن میں جہاں یہ غسل کے مسائل ہیں اس میں ہے الا عابری سبیل، یعنی سوائے وہ جو who is just going through it they are allowed to do that۔ لیکن یہ حکم جو ہے کہ ایک گیٹ سے جائیں دوسرے گیٹ سے نکل جائیں نجاست کی حالت میں، یہ تمام مساجد کے لیے ہے سوائے مسجد النبی اور مسجد الحرام کے لیے، اس لیے کہ ان کی حیثیت کچھ اور ہے۔ جب یہ حکم نازل ہوا ہے مدینہ میں، اس زمانے میں رسول اللہ کا گھر، علی کا گھر، بنو ہاشم کے کچھ دوسرے افراد کے گھر، کچھ اصحاب کے گھر پہلے سے اس طرح سے بنے تھے مسجد النبی کے ساتھ کہ گھر کا دروازہ جو ہے مسجد میں کھلتا تھا۔ جب یہ حکم نازل ہوا کہ بھائی اب جنابت اور حیض کی حالت میں یو کین ناٹ کم انٹو مسجد النبی، رسول نے کہا کہ تمام دروازوں کو بند کر دو سوائے میرا دروازہ اور علی کا دروازہ۔ یہ سنی کتابوں میں ہے، یہ اپنی بات نہیں ہو رہی ہے۔ جب دوسروں نے سنا، انکلوڈنگ رسول اللہ کے چچا کو بھی کہا گیا کہ کلوز یور ڈور، اوپن اٹ فرام دی ادر سائڈ، تو وہ رسول اللہ کے پاس آئے، ان کو اتنا برا نہیں لگا تھا کہ ہمارے دروازے کو کیوں بند کیا۔ چچا نے یہ کہا کہ بھائی آپ نے ہمارے دروازے کو تو بند کر دیا تھا، لیکن علی جو ہیں رشتے میں ہم سے چھوٹے ہیں، ان کے دروازے کو کھلا رکھا ہے۔ اور لوگوں نے بھی اعتراض کیا۔ تب رسول اسلام منبر پہ جاتے ہیں، لوگوں کو جمع کرتے ہیں اور اس کے بعد کہتے ہیں کہ ہم نے یہ حکم دیا تھا کہ دروازوں کو بند کر دو سوائے میرا دروازہ اور علی کا دروازہ، تو ہم نے سنا کہ لوگ جو ہیں ادھر ادھر کی باتیں کرتے ہیں۔ اس زمانے میں ای میلز نہیں ہوتے تھے، لیکن بہرحال کمیونٹی میں ہنگامہ اس زمانے میں بھی ہوتا تھا، ورنہ یقیناً ای میل چلے جاتے بہت سے۔ تو وہ رسول نے کہا ہم سن رہے ہیں کہ لوگ یہ باتیں کر رہے ہیں، لیکن ہم کھلا یہ سنی مصادر میں ہے کہ یہ حکم نہ حکم کرنے والے ہم ہیں، نہ دروازوں کو بند کرنے والے ہم ہیں، نہ دروازوں کو کھولنے والے ہم ہیں، ہم تو ایک عبد معمور ہیں، حکم اوپر سے آیا، ہم نے حکم کی تعمیل کی۔ شکایت کرنا ہو تو مجھ سے مت کرو، شکایت اس سے کرو کہ اس نے تمام دروازوں کو کیوں بند کر دیا اور میرا اور علی کے دروازے کو کیوں کھلا چھوڑ دیا۔ یہ بتانا تھا کہ بھائی امت کا حساب کچھ اور ہے اور آل کا حساب کچھ اور ہے، ان کو برابر مت سمجھو۔ جس طرح سے مسجدیں برابر نہیں ہوتی ہیں، آل محمد کا مرتبہ کچھ اور ہے، امت محمد کا مرتبہ کچھ اور ہے۔ صلوات پڑھنا ایک بار۔ آپ سوچ لیں امیر المومنین کی زندگی میں جو سمبولزم ہے اس لحاظ سے عجیب و غریب بات ہے۔ علی کی ولادت کہاں ہوتی ہے؟ مسجد الحرام میں، کعبے میں۔ علی کی زندگی کہاں گزری ہے؟ مدینہ میں، مسجد النبی میں۔ اور شہادت علی کو کہاں ملی؟ مسجد کوفہ میں۔ یہ جو سب سے اہم مساجد ہیں، اس انسان کا کیا کہنا جس کی ولادت ایک میں ہوئی ہو، زندگی دوسرے میں گزری ہو اور شہادت تیسری میں ہوئی ہو؟ کوئی نہیں ملے گا آپ کو۔ یہ جو تقدس ان مسجدوں کا ہے، اس سے بڑھ کے تقدس علی اور آل علی کا ہے۔ اور یہ مثالیں آپ کے سامنے ہیں۔ یہ نماز جو ہم پڑھتے ہیں مسجدوں میں جا کے، یہ صدقہ ہے حسین ابن علی اور ان کی شہادت کا۔ زیارت وارثہ ہم پڑھتے ہیں، اس میں کیا کہتے ہیں؟ اشہد انک قد اقمت الصلاۃ، آپ نے نماز قائم کی ہے۔ وہاں واقعاً وہاں قیام الصلاۃ سے مراد صرف نماز پڑھنا نہیں ہے، بلکہ نماز کو قائم اور دائم بنانا۔ انہی مسجدوں میں ہم آتے ہیں، تربت رکھتے ہیں، اور اگر وہ حسین کی تربت ہے تو وہ سجدہ جو ہم اللہ کو کرتے ہیں، ہمارا سجدہ، یہ جتنے حجابات ہیں ہمارے گناہوں کے، اس کو پار کر کے عرش الہی تک پہنچتا ہے۔ یہ حسین کے اس تربت کی برکت ہے، یہ جو کچھ ہے انہی کا صدقہ ہے۔ علی پر ضرب لگی تھی، وہ علی پہ نہیں لگی تھی، وہ نماز پہ لگی تھی، وہ سجدے پہ لگی تھی، خداوند عالم کے عبودیت پہ لگی تھی۔ امام حسین علیہ السلام نے عاشور کے دن میں جس طرح سے نماز کو قائم کیا ہے، عجیب و غریب وہاں منظر ہے کہ ظہر کی نماز کس طرح سے ادا کی، لیکن اس کے بعد جب عصر کا وقت آتا ہے، حسین اس وقت بھی نماز کو نہیں بھولتے ہیں۔ بس اتنا فرق یہ تھا کہ امام حسین علیہ السلام کو مصلی تو نہیں ملا، لیکن جس حالت میں امام حسین علیہ السلام نے اپنی آخری نماز ادا کی ہے، جب بہت دیر ہو گئی اور امام حسین علیہ السلام کی آواز، اس لیے کہ امام حسین نے جناب زینب سے کہا تھا آخر وقت میں کہ دیکھو اب تم خیمے کے باہر مت آنا، ہم ہر تھوڑی دیر کے بعد خیام کے قریب آئیں گے، لا حول ولا قوت الا باللہ العلی العظیم کا نعرہ لگائیں گے، اور تم سمجھنا کہ تمہارا بھائی زندہ ہے۔ تھوڑی تھوڑی دیر پر حسین آتے تھے مرکز پر، یہ آواز بلند کرتے تھے تاکہ سکینہ اور رباب اور سکینہ اور زینب و ام کلثوم کو سکون رہے، لیکن جب بہت دیر ہو گئی اور آواز نہ آئی، ایک مرتبہ زینب نے خیمے کے پردے کو اٹھایا، دیکھتی ہیں بھائی کہیں نظر نہیں آتا ہے، باہر نکلتی ہے، بائیں ڈھونڈتی ہیں، دائیں ڈھونڈتی ہے، حسین کہیں نہیں ملے۔ آخر میں زینب اس بلندی پہ پہنچ جاتی ہے جسے تلے زینبیہ کہا جاتا ہے، خداوندہ کسی بہن کو بھائی کا وہ منظر نہ دکھانا جو زینب نے اس بلندی سے دیکھا ہے۔ اس تلے زینبیہ پر پہنچنے کے بعد جب نشیب کی طرف دیکھتی ہے تو حسین زمین کربلا پر پڑے ہوئے تھے، اور شمر ملعون کا منحوس زانو حسین کے مقدس سینے پر تھا۔ ایک مرتبہ عمر بن سعد سے کہتی ہے، اے عمر بن سعد تو دیکھتا رہے گا اور میرا بھائی قتل ہو جائے گا۔ اتنے میں وہ ظلم ہوا، ایک نیزہ بلند ہوا، زینب نے حسین کے سر کو نوک نیزہ پر دیکھا، ہاتھوں کو بلند کرنے کے بعد دعا کرتی ہے، اللہم تقبل من ھذا القربان، خداوند اس قربانی کو اسلام کے خاطر قبول فرما۔ الا لعنۃ اللہ علی القوم الظالمین سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون۔ خداوند اس ہمارے گناہوں کو بخش دے، ہمارے توفیقات میں اضافہ فرما، اس قلیل بات قبول فرما، جن مرحومین کے ایصال ثواب کے لیے مجلس سے خداوندہ ان کے گناہوں کو معاف فرما، ان کے درجات کو بلند فرما، اور ان کو محمد آل محمد کے ساتھ محشور فرما، امام وقت کے ظہور میں تعجیل فرما۔ ربنا تقبل منا انك انت السميع العليم